Welcome to the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen, covering the week that was in professional wrestling. And welcome once again to another edition of the Juice Box. I am Juice Springsteen. This week, the first edition of the SIP series, a interview sit-down series that I'm going to be doing and conducting with wrestling fans, friends of mine, people in the biz, people not in the biz, people that love talking wrestling, people that are on the fringe of it, people that have lost the interest, but were fans before. I mean, anything is on the table. So this is going to be a cool little thing for me. I've been thinking about this for a while as just another little avenue to take with this wrestling podcast. So I figured interviewing people is something I love doing. Journalism degree, background, writing articles and such, getting interviews in the past, interviewing Kevin Kelly and Kevin Owens, among other people in my career. So I thought, why not do something similar to just an interview sit down, but we're calling it the SIP series. So this week is going to be the SIP series first episode. Next week we'll have the predictions for World's End and be back on a normal schedule. I just feel like this would be cool to fit in the schedule. So the first guest for the SIP series, this is a guy who I've known since 2015, who helped me as an intern at Trib Live Radio. This is a guy who now works for KDKA on screen, TV personality. He's written a lot of articles and done a lot of things in that realm. He's also on 93.7 The Fan on the Odyssey app as a producer guy on the air as well, and a voice you hear all over Pittsburgh media if you listen to sports talk radio or the nightly sports call, stuff like that. He's all over it. So this guy is none other than Josh Taylor, the third Josh that's been in the Juice Box thus far, and this is a great sit down. We had over an hour covering his wrestling fandom, his history at the Trib, our history at the Trib, our working history with Justin LaBar, some new stuff like current wrestling stuff, and then we go over my favorite little portion, the rapid fire at the end, where I really get to dive into his wrestling fandom. So great talk with Josh. As always, follow me on Twitter at JuicySteen, Juicy Wrestling Closet on Instagram, juicysteen.podbean.com if you'd like to listen to this show elsewhere. Apple Podcasts, rate and review. Give it 5 stars if you could. Google Podcasts, you can also listen to it. Josh Taylor HD, at Josh Taylor HD is Josh Taylor's Twitter account or X account, depending on how you look at it. So give him a follow. He does talk about wrestling every now and again on the air. So if you want to send him a question, maybe it'll be read aloud on the nightly sports call one day. So I had a great time talking with Josh. A lot of history between us, and it was great picking his brain and talking for well over an hour. So sit back, grab a juice box, because I asked him what his favorite version of Juice Box is, and enjoy the SIP series, Josh Taylor, right here, right now, on the Juice Box. And welcome. We are here in the Juice Box. Normally, I would be solo doing just a random show during the week, but I'm going to do another little series, as it were, to add to Triple Threat Theater. We've got the prediction shows I always do with Eisenberg and, maybe LaBar, some other guys. I'm going to do another little type of episode series that I'm starting right now this week. It's called the SIP series, where I'm going to be sitting down and interviewing just individuals that are either outside the wrestling world, inside the wrestling world, fans of wrestling, used to be fans of wrestling. It's going to cover really anything. So I felt that the SIP series would be a really cool introduction to a lot of people's just fandom. And that's what this show is for the fans by a fan. So I'd like to begin the SIP series with this guy. This is the third Josh that is entering the Juice Box. We had Josh Cross, we had Josh Eisenberg, and now we get KDKA-TV on-air personality. We have 93.7 The Fan on Odyssey personality. the one, the only, Josh Taylor is in the juice box here for the Sip series. Josh, how you been, man? It's been a long time. I know we've used to cross paths way back in 2015, 2016, and life goes on, but here we are. We're going to talk wrestling today. How you been, man?
It's good to talk to you, brother. First of all, let me point out I'm very honored to be in such great company of Joshes. Shout out to Eisenberg; he's good people.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, second of all, I'm trying to think back. I think the last time you and I probably ran into each other, I think we were at a show. I think we were at PPG, and I was with a couple people, and you were with LeBar and the usual suspects, and our crews crossed paths. I'm like, oh, it's my people. So it was kind of good.
I think it was at the ticketing. I do recall that now. I think we came up the escalator. I was like, "Is that Josh Taylor?"
Yeah, I think I had like my niece and nephew with me because they're huge fans. So it was one of those things. It's like their birthdays fall around the same time. So we took them as like huge, like a big Christmas, like a big birthday present. Like my wife and I took them, and they loved it. So it was a big deal. But yeah.
Oh yeah, man. Always good times. I mean, PPG is going to have SmackDown April 19th. Next year, so that'll be another fun show for those in the Pittsburgh area. Let's just get into this. So this is the SIP series. So this is unlike what I normally do. We're going to touch on a little bit of everything. We're going to have a little bit of current stuff. We're going to get a little bit into your fandom as a pro wrestling fan, and then just some random stuff in between all that. And we're going to close with my personal favorite, the rapid fire portion, where I kind of give you just random questions about wrestling, and you hit them as quickly as you like. So
nice.
Let's start off with this. Just as a casual, lover of drinks, what is your favorite juice box? High C, Minute Maid, what do you got?
Oh, Ecto Cooler all day.
Ecto Cooler, okay.
I gotta go with the OG. That's the OG classic, man. Ecto Cooler is the go-to. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, wasn't that still High C? Was it?
Yeah, High C.
Yeah.
High C.
Okay.
It was like the little green Slimer from the animated Ghostbusters, man.
So it was against the Ghostbusters, yeah.
Which was a clutch cartoon back in the day. Like, I'm showing my age. I'm in my early 40s, but like that was like a prime cartoon back in the day. You had the little ghost Slimer on it. Ecto Cooler, man. That was the go-to. Yeah. Shout out to all my elder millennials and Gen Xers who know what's up.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. So I wanted to break the juice box barrier there. All right, let's just get into your wrestling stuff. So as a pro wrestling fan, just kind of give me, what's your first memory about wrestling? Like, how did you ever even know about wrestling? And then how did you first realize that you loved it? Like, was it a family member? Was it someone, a friend? Just, kind of give me a little rundown about that?
Oh, family members, man. Like my older brother, my brother's 7 years older than I am, my cousins, and we would spend weekends like staying with my grandparents. And like my grandmother would have like eight or nine grandkids just piled up in the house. So we're all just like falling all over each other in the living room. But between my brother and my two older cousins, we would watch Saturday night's Main Event, dude. Like that was the thing on NBC. We'd watch it, and it was Hulk Hogan, it was Macho Man, it was Junkyard Dog, it was it was that crew. It was All American Wrestling on Sundays. Like the next morning, sometimes if we were watching, if we were there on a Saturday's Main Event, we watched that. But like on the other weekends, like Sunday morning, we were watching All American Wrestling. That was just how we did it. And my brother and I, at our house, we had the old school WWF ring with the red, white, and blue ropes and the big rubber figures, not like the plastic ones where you could actually control the hands. Like, no, we had the big rubber ones where the arms and legs didn't move. And if you threw it hard enough, you might be able to knock another human being out with it. And we had the old school, like Hulk Hogan, Nikolai Volkov, Iron Sheik. Junkyard Dog was my favorite back then. I'm pretty sure we had Macho Man. The cool thing about Junkyard Dog was like it had its own little like dog chain around its neck, but like everything was painted on. So when the paint started to chip, the chain was just brown. It just matched it was really ridiculous. But that's how we were back then. And then we had crazy ideas. Like my brother would stack like encyclopedia books off the shelf, and like we would have wrestlers like jumping off of those. Like it was just absolutely ridiculous, some of the stuff that we did. But that was it, man. It was like embedded like into my childhood. And then I got older and got to high school, and I was in high school, and this was during the Attitude Era. This was, the height of WCW with the NWO. And One of my really good friends in high school, we're still really good friends to this day, my buddy Brian, we had our first two classes of the day we had together. And he was a big WCW fan. I was a big WWE fan. So we would literally tape the shows on Monday night. I would tape Raw. He would tape Nitro. And then the next day we'd swap tapes. So we'd swap tapes on Tuesday and Homer. It was like a huge deal. And we did that for like a year and a half, because we were in musical theater together. So we were already friends. And then we had a class together that next year. I think it was like my sophomore, junior year, we had a class together. We're like, dude, this is great. So like we went back and forth with it. And to this day, like, we still talk about that. We're like, dude, remember we used to trade tapes in high school? And like, he got married, I think 2 summers ago. And we were explaining to my wife and his wife how we became friends. And they're looking at us like, you two are crazy. Like, we were that dedicated back then. And that's kind of how it carried over for me. Then I got to college, met my roommate, my best friend, we've been best friends for more than 20 years. He's a big WWE and WCW fan. So he was like old school wrestling fan like I was. So that kind of carried over. And we went to shows together. We were in college. We went to Duquesne University. We'd rock right down the Civic Arena and go to shows like here and there. And we had a couple other friends like that. So, and then I'm going to show my age here for a second. Back when there was still a Hooters in the city of Pittsburgh, we would go to Hooters in Station Square and watch pay-per-views. Like we were all in, man. We made this like pretty big commitment during our time living together, and that kind of carried over. And the crazy part about it is he was the bigger fan back then. We're older now, and I'm the bigger fan than he is. And he's got a son who I think is 8 or 9 years old, and I'm the bigger wrestling fan now. So it's kind of just strange how that's all come about.
It's wild how that works.
And it's kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. Like, I've gotten older, graduated from college. Kind of got away from it for a while, and then I started working. My first job ever in this business in TV was with WTAE, the ABC station here in Pittsburgh, and I got to know a really good friend of mine, my buddy Joe Heckel, who was a huge fan, like way bigger than I ever was, and he kind of reintroduced me into wrestling again. And a bunch of us would get together at his place and watch pay-per-views and stuff, and we'd go to shows and stuff together. So he kind of reintroduced me into it. Then after I got my first on-air job, I was working in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Kind of fell off again, moved back to Pittsburgh in 2014, and I start out at a place called Trib Live Radio.
Oh, well,
but I'm back to Pittsburgh. So then that kind of got reignited there too.
I'm going to pause you there because we're going to get into the Trib Live stuff. Yes. Because I kind of want to follow up on some of the stuff you said already. So, yeah, you had the LJN figures, which were so interesting because I'm a little younger. I'm 30, but I had hand-me-down LJN. So I had the Iron Sheik. I had some of Randy Savage, Hogan, some of those guys. I know for sure that the King Kong Bundy one, you could have killed someone by throwing it at him. It was a huge action figure. And I
George the Animal Steel, too.
Yeah, that was a thicker one as well. Yeah. I love, though, that you mentioned that they were big rubber guys, because if you are in the world of wrestling, figures now, formerly Zack Ryder, now his normal real name, Matt Cardona, and Brian Myers, formerly Kurt Hawkins, they have the Major Wrestling Figure podcast, and they have now been so successful with that they have started their own toy line, and they've done Major Bendies, which are like the little like Bendums, and they've continued almost the line that was the WWF line back in the day with current guys or other old talent they could sign. But they've also now started making, quote, big rubber guys. And it's the same type of figure as the LJN. It's as close as you could get. And they have done a new Savage because they have his, they signed his estate. Ric Flair, they have one. So all that's coming back, man. Nostalgia is where it's at.
I got to jump on that. I got to get on
absolutely.
My wife's going to kill me. I don't care, but I got to get on it. I got to decorate stuff in my new office. So.
Absolutely. You also mentioned Hooters for like a blast area for pay-per-view, and those were the day. I don't think I ever got to go to one, but I always knew, like, man, because I remember once I was in Myrtle Beach, and I was like, man, I guess I'm not going to watch this pay-per-view. And I never ended up watching it, but I was like, oh, there's a Hooters, and they're playing it down the street. And I was maybe 14 or 15, so there's no way I could convince my family to take me there. But I was like, this is an amazing idea. And now I mean, you could watch it anywhere. You could watch it on your phone, on the bus. You could watch it in movie theaters. It's pretty wild, man. And
Yeah,
the
that's
last,
back when you had to pay for them. So if you could find a place that was showing them
that's
for free,
right.
you jumped on it. And the Hooters always had them. They never charged you. All you had to do was just order some food or drink some beer and
Yeah, and you're
talk to some
there.
of the girls. You had a ball, man. It was perfect.
The
Perfect.
other one little point I wanted to touch on was you mentioned how you were tape trading with a friend of yours, and I just find that fascinating because through the '90s, tape trading in general was such a huge deal. Um, in the early days of the internet as well,
Yes.
where people would just be trading stuff, you just never saw it. Primarily, I would say that was in the ECW realm or in the Japan wrestling realm of stuff you just could not find anywhere. And that's how people accessed it. I love though that you and him, your friend, would tape Raw and Nitro opposite. Like we,
Yeah.
myself, my family, we were a WCW family, so we'd watch Nitro, but we would tape Raw and watch Raw some other time. I love though that you did that, but you traded them back and forth.
Oh
Like
yeah, we were dedicated.
that
We
was
we,
such a
we stuck to
great.
it.
That's a great way to not only make a friend, but like they rely on you. You rely on
Yeah.
them. Like you got to watch this show. Like I gotta
Yeah.
tape this for them. You know?
Because there was no DVR back then, so you had to like
No.
tape it and make sure it recorded. Like there was a dedication to making sure the production went off the way it was supposed to. Like it had some production value to it. And like this is one of those like VCR generation. I'm one of those kids, man. And
Oh
it
yeah.
now granted, I can still remember having to record soap operas for my sisters when they worked at Kennywood when I was a kid. So it's like,
Wow.
so having to record wrestling shows was a much bigger progression for me. I was happier to do it that way.
Oh,
But yeah,
absolutely.
I remember hearing stories of Eddie Kingston. He was talking about how like he was trading tapes with guys with like New Japan tapes and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there going, man,
Yeah.
tape trading people, my kind of
Yeah.
folks. So hearing
Exactly.
stuff
That
like
was
that is just awesome.
Yeah, man, that was the only way to do it back then. That and like reading the like PWI and like some of the
Yeah.
magazines. Like there's
I
no
had a
that was the
friend
only
that got
way
the
you could.
magazines and delivered to me. He had a subscription. So he would bring it to
Yeah.
school. We'd all be like, dude, what did they say about last week? So like that was how we kept in with it. It was awesome.
It was the only way to keep up with stuff, even if it were a month behind. Like you
Yep.
couldn't see anything else. Like that was it. Like if you didn't
Exactly.
know and you turned it on, someone could have jumped ship from WWE to WCW, and you never would have known that it was going to happen. Um, Otherwise, like now, everything is known. Everything we all know what's going to happen. Like all we want to do is find out what's going to happen before the show airs. Before you wait a month and you'd see it in WWF magazine.
Exactly. Like there's everything gets spoiled now. You're almost like, man, it key example. I'm at work. I'm doing the TV side of things. I'm hosting the nightly sports call. It's a show we run every night at 10:35 on our sister station, KDKA Plus. And basically, it's just like a 25-minute call-in show where people call and ask sports questions and stuff. And by the way, yes, I do get wrestling questions occasionally, both calls and tweets. But I'm hosting the show, and this is while Survivor Series is happening. This past
Oh
Survivor
boy!
Series, so I didn't see the ending live. I totally missed it. So when the
Wow!
show is over, my producer gets in my ear, and goes, "Dude, you're not gonna believe this." And I couldn't tell him, "Don't tell me." And like he was like,
Right,
"It's
right.
like, dude, you're not gonna believe it. CM Punk is back." I'm like, "I told you not to tell me," so like it ruined it. But I went back and watched it, but I'm like, "Oh, come on." So I
Uh,
was really, really disappointed that he spoiled that for me. But yeah,
that's incredible though. I love when it permeates into the somewhat mainstream, and I
oh,
think wrestling
absolutely.
is always good for that. It's great fodder. It's a TV show, but it's also a sports related TV show. It really can capture a lot of different areas. It's not as niche as I think people like to
I
put it in a box. And not the
I
juice
explained
box.
it to my wife. I explained it to my wife the best way I could explain it. I said, "Look, it's a soap opera with a bunch of athletes who are fighting each other in a predetermined outcome, but it's
Yeah.
choreographed."
Yeah.
And it's all on
But
TV, but you can also watch it live. I was like, it's a Broadway meets. I was like, it's like Broadway show meets athletic event meets telenovela
oh
meets
yeah,
like
oh yeah.
stage production meets like like traveling circus. Like all of it's kind of wrapped up into one. But you can also meet the performers live. And she's like, okay, that makes sense now. I was like, see, you add it all up. Like when you really put it in perspective, it doesn't sound too terrible. My mom thinks I'm crazy, but my wife, she
Ah,
tolerates it. She thinks it makes sense now.
that's good. That's good. And I mean, I think Eric Bischoff said this on one of his shows. It's just wrestling in general is just supposed to be a buffet, you know. Not if I watch it, it might not be catering to me. If it's
Right.
a funny segment, because I know that's for the kids, or a really serious segment might not be for the kids, or stuff in ring might cater to the real hardcore fans, but I might want to see more of a storyline based thing. And good wrestling shows will give you all of that in
Yes.
spurts instead of ignoring some of that, you know.
It's comedy and
So
tragedy, but it's even deeper. Like comedy and
it's so
tragedy,
much
it's one
more.
side or the corner or the other. Wrestling, there's layers to it. There's so many different additives. And I think when I told my wife, I think when I used the example of a telenovela, because my wife is Hispanic, she's from New York, so she grew up
Okay.
watching telenovelas. And for those of you who understand the genre, you'll see what I'm getting with this.
A lot of
But
slapping.
like just a lot of crazy storylines and like this person like faked his own death and it was like married to his like aunt, like it's just crazy. It gets like really, it's like soap operas on steroids. So when I was telling her, I was like, yeah, some of these storylines get to like telenovela stuff. And then I actually made her watch the Liv Morgan Lana wedding interruption with Bobby Lashley. I made my
Oh
wife watch this,
man.
and she's like, "Oh my god, this is telenovela stuff." I was like, "See, exactly. This is what it is." And she's like, "Okay, this is crazy." I was like, "But this is how it goes. This is how it is from time to time." I was like, "Every
Yeah.
once in a while, they kind of wrestle each other, and someone knocks each other out, but that's kind of how it goes." So when I showed her that, she's just like, "Okay, this is nuts." And there are times when I'm watching and she will enter the room and I will catch her paying attention and she will act like she doesn't know what's going on, but I know she knows what's happening and she
Oh
has an
yeah.
interest in it. So I've
Oh
I've
yeah.
been able to slowly reel her in.
We'll get into closet wrestling fans later on in this episode because I've got a question about that. All right, let's move a little bit more forward here. Do you have a first memory though of wrestling at all? Like something you
Um,
recall, like one of the first things you remember, maybe like a moment that happened in wrestling.
I would have to say that I actually saw like when it happened live.
And not
I would
even
have
that. I mean, if you saw something live, great. But even if
yeah.
it was just like a replay of an old thing that you were like, oh wow, and like that hooked you, whatever you got.
I think the first thing I saw where I was just like, oh my God, how is this happening? Has to be um I'm trying to remember which one happened first chronologically, but two things stand
I'll
out in
help you.
my mind. One was the storyline with Jake the Snake Roberts and Ravishing Rick Rude, where he
Oh
actually interviewed
yeah.
he ends up meeting Jake Roberts' wife. The
Oh,
other
Rick
one,
Rude has his her name is Cheryl, and her face was
yes,
on his tights.
was on his tights. Yes. The other one I remember also involves Jake the Snake Roberts with Macho Man Randy Savage, where the snake bites him.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Those are the
Hey, you
first two
said you were
things that are
watching Saturday Night's Main
burned into
Event,
my head. So
and I want to say that took place on one. I'm
I
not sure if
think
it was
so.
Saturday Night's Main Event, but that was one of the that was little Attitude Era before Attitude Era
Oh
because
yeah,
that
yeah.
snake was real and it was really biting him, and they were just like, okay, he's gonna get bit. Let's just take it. Like keep rolling.
And we were like elementary school age, like between me, my brother, my cousins. I think my sister was in there. We're all like, "Is that snake really biting him? Is he gonna
Yeah.
die?" We did not know what was happening. We really thought like Macho Man Randy Savage is gonna get poisoned by this snake and die, and no one's in the ring doing anything. Like no one's calling the
No, they're
police.
just allowing
Like
it to happen.
this is normal. What's going on right now? And I just remember going, how is this okay? And like you had all these questions and nothing was happening, but at the same time you didn't care because you wanted to see what happened next. And yeah,
Oh
that's one
man.
of those things that's burned into my memory. I'll never forget it.
That's incredible, man. Let's okay, so I think you kind of mentioned it with your wrestling figures, but if you had any like would you consider your favorite wrestler growing up if you had to pick one?
Ooh,
You
favorite
mentioned
growing up.
Junkyard Dog might have been one of them, but
I
I
was
mean
a
you did mention
JYD
quite
guy
a
for
few.
sure. That's a good question. I had a bunch of them. Probably Macho Man Randy Savage. Like
Yeah.
that was the one that probably gravitated toward. And it didn't hurt that he was like he was a guy that carried over eras.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
if you were like me, if you're in your early 40s, like he was one of those staple guys in the 80s, and you went into the 90s and he was still there, and he
Mm-hmm.
goes over to WCW and like he still transcends all that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say Macho Man Randy Savage, and it's hilarious because I shouldn't say it's hilarious because the occasion itself was sad, but
Yeah.
I will bring this one story up. During the Triple Live Radio days, when Macho Man Randy Savage passed away,
Yeah.
a bunch of the guys at the Trib, like between the newspaper guys and the radio guys, we did a Macho Man Randy Savage tribute video, and we just kind of cut Macho Man promos.
Oh, that's amazing.
So
I
if
remember
someone can find that,
yeah,
it's
that's
on
something
there.
you should dig up in the archives. I know when Paul Bearer passed away, they were doing a lot of they were trying to mimic his voice in WWE, like Roman Reigns, I remember, did it. Like, so I love that you guys ended up doing that, and that was 4 or 5 years before Paul Bearer passed away. So that's or maybe 2 or 3 actually.
It preceded Paul Bearer, and the things I remember specifically, I remember Justin LaBar being involved. Rob Rossi did a really good Macho Man. Like Rossi's Macho Man was good, and so did all people like Steelers beat writer Joe Rutter, who you would not expect to turn into he had a great Macho Man, and he even pulled out the little creamer packet, like the one in the plastic cup. I'm like, oh come on, man! You didn't tell us we could have props. Like
works with props.
Blew me away. I'm like, you guys crushed this. Like we had too much fun. And Rob Rossi did a Macho Man promo, but he's cutting it on one of the other Rob Rossi, for those who don't know, writes about the Penguins or wrote for the Trip about the Penguins back then. But he's cutting a promo as Macho Man on one of the other hockey writers, on Josh Yohe. And we're behind the camera, trying not to bust out laughing. Like we're dying while we're watching this. Because LaBar's like, you want to go watch Rossi? Hell yeah, I want to go watch Rossi. I'm like, and we're trying not to die laughing watching Rossi cut this promo. It was fantastic, so much fun. So yeah, my answer is Macho Man Randy Savage, just for the reasons of so much being burned into my brain and all the other stuff that came from it, for sure.
Oh man, yeah, I mean, like you said, he a lot of those guys. Hogan and Savage, I mean, mostly, but so many of those guys were huge when wrestling was at its absolute peak in 87, 88, 89. And then
Savage's Steamboat to this day is still one of my favorite WrestleMania matches.
Oh, yeah. Hey, we might touch on something similar to that in the rapid fire. And then they go to WC, both of them, of course, Hogan and Savage specifically, both go to WCW and reinvent everything in the 90s too, and they just helped solidify wrestling as this huge media giant in the entertainment world, which, I mean, it's still cooking today. Let's get into what you were gonna do. Actually, one more quick thing about your fandom. Do you remember the first show you attended?
Oh my God. I know the first show I attended. I won't say why, but I don't remember some parts of it.
Okay.
Let's just say I was aided in my ability to remember certain things.
Fair.
I was at a Monday Night Raw show, and the reason why I remember this, because there was one particular part. There was a hardcore match. I believe it was Raven and Crash Holly. It was a Monday Night Raw taping in Pittsburgh. I was in college. I had never been to a live show before I got to college.
Okay.
Me and two of my friends, my really good friends from college, we all went together. And there was a Raven and Crash Holly hardcore match, and they came up the stairs past our section. And we ended up, they walked past us, and we're in the camera, yeah, we're cheering, and they came past us. And me and my roommate got home, and we were right there at Civic Arena, so we ran back to Duquesne's campus, and we watched the whole tape back. Granted, we were at the show. We were there till almost midnight. We go back and watch the whole thing back till 3 a.m. And we're like, dude, we got to see if we were in this match. Sure enough, we are in this match. And my face, as I saw myself, I'm sitting there going, thank God my parents don't watch wrestling, because they would be wondering why their son is here looking like this. But yeah, that was my first show I ever went to. After that, I was like, I am going to a live show anytime I can. And throughout the years in college, anytime they were in town, we would go. And a bunch of my friends would go. My brother would come with us. And it was after that, we were hooked after that. I'm like, I'm doing this any chance I get.
That's fantastic. So as you were doing that, man, I dove into the Pro Wrestling Wiki, and I found exactly, I think, what show it was. God. So you did say Raw, and it was Raw. Oddly enough, a day after my 8th birthday, so January 29th, 2001.
Yes,
Raven,
that's it.
Raven defeated Crash, spoilers, to retain the WWF Hardcore title. You want to hear the card for that night? Whether you recall it or not, I'll give you the card.
Let's go.
We got the Dudley Boys defeating Kai and Tai, Funaki, and Taka Michinoku to retain the tag titles.
Oh, my God.
Val Venus, accompanied by Ivory and Steven Richards, who were a part of the Right to Censor at the moment.
I remember that one.
Defeated Steve Blackman. You had the Hardys with Lita defeating the APA with Jackie. The Right to Censor. That one I remember, too. The Good Father and Bull Buchanan in a tag title #1 contender 3-way dance.
The Good Father. Oh, my God. How did I forget about that? Oh,
you get Raven and Crash Holly.
Yes.
You get Undertaker with Kane defeating Haku with Rikishi, which is crazy that you got to see that mini Haku Ming run.
I do remember Haku
after WCW.
Yep, I do remember
that. Jackie and Lita ended in a no contest. And then this is you can't get it much better than this. #1 contender, 4 corners match, #1 contender for the world title. The Rock defeated Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, and The Big Show.
Yes.
Wow.
I remember going nuts because I bought a Rock shirt that night.
That is Raw episode 401. How about that?
I'm going to go back and watch it. I'm writing it down right now. Episode 401. I'm going to go back and watch it.
Yeah,
that's that was wild, my first live experience, and I bought a they were selling black and gold Rock shirts that night. I'll never forget it.
That's great.
I bought one. I couldn't tell you where that shirt is to this day, but I bought one.
Did you ever, outside of that, have you been to any of the pay-per-views?
I was just at...
Were you at Payback?
Yes, I was at Payback. I had to think about it because I literally have the chair sitting behind me here in my office against the wall. I had to go I had to go look at the chair.
I got a chair as well, as a matter of fact.
I
any
was
of the
there
other ones?
That was my first pay-per-view.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was my first one. I've always done like tapings like Raw or SmackDown or like house shows. I had
house shows are really good though too, but
yeah, we did a couple house shows.
Pittsburgh's been spoiled with actual TV recently, so it's pretty good.
Absolutely. Yeah, we went to the pay-per-view and that was through the help of a good friend of mine. Was like, hey, I got tickets if you want them. I'm like, absolutely. So we jumped and went, and we were like, dude, I'm so glad.
Hey, that was a good little show, I thought.
And I lost my voice during the show.
I mean,
I lost my voice like walking to the show. Like I was already getting over being sick, so I already couldn't talk. So like I had no voice. It was terrible, but I did not care. Time of my life, did not care.
And that was the same day that AEW released CM Punk. It was a hell of a news cycle day. I remember getting to a bar and some of the guys that are in my group chat, Wrestling Nation, they were like, "Oh, did you see?" And I was like, "What?" Because like we're just going to the show, right? And they're like, "Oh, CM Punk got released." What? You just like casually telling me this? Like I
didn't know till we got to the show. Like because
wow.
I was in such a rush that day because it was Labor Day weekend. I had family in town. Mm-hmm. One of my really good friends was in town from Cleveland. My daughter had her christening that afternoon. Like there was just everything happening. Like so much stuff happened at the same time. So I didn't really know anything until I got inside the arena.
Forget all that. CM Punk got released.
Right. Like I get in the arena, sit down, and my buddy goes, "You got to look at this." I'm like, "What?" And he pulls it up on his phone. I'm like, "You're kidding." He's like, "No, really." Like he pulled up I think it might have been Fightful. He pulled that story up, and I'm like, "What?" And like we just kind of both sat there in like shock, like what is going on? And then that show happened, and we almost forgot that's how we were leaving because like this is crazy. And for the record, Payback, Kevin Owens does the swanton onto Dominic Mysterio, like right off the top of the section that was right next to us.
Oh, that's
so we were right there in that section. So it was like I don't know why I keep going to live events and stuff happens near me. I must be like the Forrest Gump of wrestling fans, but
absolutely.
Like, yeah, it was pretty crazy. And my nephew is 14, and he was losing his mind. He's like, I can't believe this is happening. He was freaking out. It was.
Hey,
really cool.
you said your voice was shot, and you're in your 40s, so it transcends everybody, man.
And he has Snapchat, so he is like literally put like he had the longest Snapchat story I've ever seen. It had to be like an hour long of just clips that he was
like the whole show.
Recorded. Oh my god, pretty much. It was insane.
Quickly, you did say you seem to be like the Forrest Gump of wrestling fans. I don't know if you've caught it or not, but the Vladimir Superfan documentary on Peacock, I think you should check out if you haven't already.
I've heard about it, and I haven't seen it yet. And I need like a good big chunk of time where I'm not like changing diapers or chasing my son to sit down and watch it. I'm
pretty sure it's just like a 45-minute deal. Like it's not too crazy.
But
I think you've probably seen this guy. He's like a bald guy who's jacked with glasses that was like at every Madison Square Garden show. And it's just like you would watch any pay-per-view. He's front row. He's always there. He's always interacting. And like Forrest Gump, you put that, like, that's a great term. Like some of these guys end up there, and you were right underneath. I could not believe that because I was in the 100 level, so I got to see it across from where I was. Him in that Pens jersey of all things too. I
yes.
Loved that. So
people went nuts.
That was a great way to incorporate that, and I'm glad that they did. Well, they're two Canadians, so why wouldn't they do that?
Right, two hockey fans. We kind of had a heads up that something was going to happen because we saw a couple of dudes that were like standing right down at the bottom of the stairs next to our section, and no one's walking through. We're like, why are they blocking off this section unless someone's coming through here? And then maybe they got to that part of the match. I came through and we're like, okay, they're coming. They're going to come this way. They're going to come this way. It's like we knew. We were kind of waiting on it. And when they did, we freaked out. But yeah, totally worth it.
All right, now let's get into what you were discussing a little earlier. So 2015, I graduate college. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with my life. Some might say I still don't know what I'm doing with my life, although I'm kind of doing okay for myself these days. And I want to do something with my degree. I have a journalism degree, and I'm like, I want to do something with maybe radio or TV. I didn't really know what, maybe writing articles. And my friend, who, of course, another guy named Josh Cross, who has been on this show before, he showed me back in the day in college about Chair Shot Reality. And I was like, oh, that's a interesting way to do something like a wrestling talk show, like pardon the interruption, like around the horn, like they're just talking about wrestling, but it's a couple guys. I'm like, this is genius. And lo and behold, I graduate and I find out, oh, well, he's got, Justin LaBar's this main guy, and he's done, he does stuff on Trib Live Radio, and there's some internship opportunities there. And I'm like, well, that could be maybe a way to get in there to maybe talk to him, just pick his brain or something. And little did I know, I got interviewed for it, and they're like, oh, yep, you got the internship. And outside of me, slinging free stuff at Riverhounds games, which was fun, by the way. Don't get me wrong.
I remember those days. I produced a couple of those shows, man.
I loved hanging out there. It's a great view of the city too. And shout out to Jose, by the way. Jose will have to get on in the juice box one of these days. So
Jose Negron, who, by the way, is doing an amazing job. He's covering local high school sports here for the Mon Valley Independent, and he's one of the better high school writers in the city, man. He's doing well for himself.
That's right. I tell you that from experience. I worked with him at the Cal Times at Cal U before it was Penn West.
My niece is at Penn West now. She's a freshman.
Hey, Harvard on the Mon, baby.
There you go.
Yeah, so that, he was always great, but so him and myself, we got this internship, and I was like, oh, well, you can, sit in on a couple of shows, like, write an article or whatever and do this and that, but you can sit in on shows if you'd like. And I was like, oh, okay, can I sit in on LaBar's show? And quickly, within the first week after I did that first show, I was like, I want to make it known that, like, to this guy that I'm not just sitting here, like, I know what I'm talking about. I'd love to just banter and like pick his brain and really get involved. And it was a snowball effect. I started producing his show. I started like talking on his show, and then I got to be on Chair Shot Reality and all that stuff. And that's great. And LaBar's, pretty much the catalyst for a lot of the stuff that I've been doing ever since then. But in those infant days of Trib Live Radio, there was one Josh Taylor, and running the boards and talking wrestling with us, and just BSing whenever we're not, on downtime. And I just love that atmosphere, reminiscent on those days. I can't believe that as we get into 2024, that'll be 9 years since I first got in there. And those days are just the best, man. So I would love to hear your history working with LaBar, how it started, and then how, like, I don't know, how I kind of came in and how it just kind of transformed into just like, we're just always talking about wrestling every time I'm in there.
You mentioned the atmosphere of Trib Live Radio, man. This is like set wrestling reality to the side, because that was his own experience. But I was there like in the morning when the production started. Now, Trib Live Radio was really, it was a creation that was so far ahead of its time. We're talking a decade, maybe a decade and a half ahead of its time, where you had online radio, where it was live online and it was in podcast form. And this is before you really like had a lot of podcasts out there. This is before it was a really big thing. So this was something that a lot of people could not grasp. But Trip Live Radio had its own app. You could listen online. It had like replays. It posted stuff on its website every day. Like there was always a way you could find it. And I got started there, I believe, in 2014. I just got done with my first on-air job in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I moved back home. Was kind of looking for what my next move was going to be. I wanted to get back closer to Pittsburgh. My dad had passed away the year before. I'm like, I got to get back home and kind of recalibrate. And a couple friends of mine who worked at Trip Live Radio, I had worked there previously part-time a couple years before, kind of like as a fill-in part-time host. And they're like, hey, we got a producer job here. Come on back down. And it was almost like, you know, you move away and then you move back and you have the exact same friends in the neighborhood. That's what it was like. I come back. I'm working with these guys again, Ken Laird and Guy Junker and Tim Benz. I'm working with these guys and Mike Barker, our executive producer, and Mike Graw and LeBar. And now I hadn't worked with LeBar a lot in my previous stint at Trip Live Radio, like 2010, 2011. I hadn't really worked with Justin that much. We had met a couple times. We knew who the other one was, but I hadn't worked with Justin a lot. So I get back in 2014, and they're like, okay, you're going to produce these shows. And I would produce basically from 9 until like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And they're like, all right, Tuesdays from 2 to 3, you're going to do Wrestling Reality with Justin LeBar. And I'm like, we do a wrestling show? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I ended up producing Justin's show. And Justin's show was different because every other show on Trip Live Radio, it was live, but they didn't take phone calls. Like they would take emails or like social media, but they didn't take phone calls. Justin was the only one who took calls live. So, and there was no delay button, no nothing. But then again, it was all internet, so there was no FCC regulation. You could almost say whatever you wanted. They kind of dissuaded you from saying anything, but you could kind of get away with it. So we didn't have a delay or anything. So I would actually take calls during the show, and it wasn't like we were just taking calls from people locally. And you know this, Juice. You had callers in Arkansas and in Texas and in New York
every
and DC.
day. Every
all
week
over the country,
people.
Every week you had people calling the show who are just like, this is nuts that these many people get on the show. And it said two things to me. One, that the model for what we did was ahead of its time. But two, LeBar had an audience, man. He had people all over the country, and he had them every week on this platform that people in Pittsburgh barely knew about, that was really starting to grow in popularity. But there are people around the country listening to this. The weird thing about it is I was working in TV in Arkansas for 3 years. I come back, I'm working at Trip Live Radio in Pittsburgh for a couple more. And there's a guy who ends up tweeting me. He's like, dude, I didn't know you were on Trip Live Radio now. I used to watch you when you were on TV in Arkansas, and now you're hosting a show. This is crazy. I'm like, what? It was so surreal. But getting to work with Justin, like, not only did it kind of reinsert me into like my wrestler fandom, and I was kind of in and out and kind of like ebb and flow, it reinserted me into that. But working with Justin, listening to him and how he could break something down and make you see it from behind the curtain. So it gave me a much easier perspective of what you're trying to understand and how it all comes together. Because Justin has so much experience in the business itself, so he can look at it from that perspective. So it taught me to understand exactly, you know, how shows are booked, how character development's important, what people are doing during a match. And it's like, okay, so it really helped me kind of understand it better. So the more I would watch and I would listen to Justin and I would get it. And I'm like, okay, now I know what he's talking about. So it's one thing when you watch it as a fan and you see what happens. It's another thing when you get an insider understanding of it all in a different perspective. So now you appreciate it differently and you understand it better. And it really just kind of deepened the pool for me as far as, you know, once I was back to being a fan, like I was in for a penny, in for a pound by then. And then like a year or so in, Justin he's like, hey, I got this intern. His name is Juice Springsteen. I was like, that's kind of a catchy name. And he's like, yeah, he's gonna sit in with us for a while. So you come in, you're sitting on the show for a little bit. And then within it didn't take long. I'd say maybe within a few weeks and like maybe a month or two tops, Justin's like, I want you to train him on the board. I'm like, absolutely, man. So like training you on the board, how to take calls, and you were taking the same call as I were, and you're running the board. After a while, I'm like, okay, I'll kind of step aside. So the cool thing was I got to kind of step aside, and I could listen to you guys while I'm like writing my column, because I had to write a column every week for the website and doing other stuff too. Or like kind of I'm like clipping I'm clipping podcast episodes and stuff like that. So I can listen to you guys just run while I'm doing other stuff. And I'm like, man, this is best of both worlds. But yeah, it was kind of cool to watch how quickly like you were ingrained into it. And I remember like from the very beginning, you made it known quickly how big of a wrestling fan you were and how serious you were about it. I'm like, well, if he figures out the technical side of this, like this could be huge. And you guys took it and ran, man. Like it, and I start seeing you on Chair Shot reality episodes. I'm like, dude, Juice is killing it. This is kind of crazy. And it was one of those like, it was lightning in a bottle, man. It was kind of cool to watch it. So to see like where you are at this point, and to hear LeBar doing Sirius XM, and I go to a couple IWC shows, and he's there, and it's like, dude, this is so nuts. And like 9 years ago, we were all in this little tiny closet of a room of an office in the Clark building on the north side talking about wrestling, and here we all are. It's really, really crazy.
It really is, man. You touched on a few things there that like Trip Live Radio was so ahead of its time.
Oh my God. I miss those days.
I forgot about the app. I forgot that like they had that, and that like I didn't realize that LeBar's show was the only one that took calls, but he took calls every single show, every week, no matter what.
And when I say the only show, I mean the literal only show. Like now, granted, we would have guests on that we would call, but no one else took calls coming in except for Justin. It was the only thing like that. And I just remember, and like people would ask me, it's like, so what do you do all day at Triple Live Radio? Because I produced, and I would write a column, and I would do other stuff, but I also had my own show a couple times a week. So it's like, I'm like, basically, I kind of sit in a room and argue with my friends all day about sports. Like, that was really what it was. And it's like, and then once a week, I get to talk about wrestling. So it was like, I tell people all the time it was stealing a paycheck. But the way the format went, like, you could listen online on the website, you could listen on the app, but then everything was podcasted. So you could download the podcast, and pretty much the podcast is everything that happened. We just kind of clipped it and posted it. So you could listen to everything. Yeah. And we're talking early 2010s going into mid 2010s before anybody thought of this stuff. And it was so like far fetched back then. Yeah. Where people I know now didn't understand it. But like now it's totally the norm now, and everybody is up to it. So
I know you're experiencing it as we speak.
Right. It's like, because like I've been involved with a couple podcasts of my own. And it's just like, dude, we were on the upward swing of this wave during its infancy, and I don't think we really realized what we had at the time. But you look at it now, you're like, absolutely, man, this is cool to really be a part of it.
Yeah, man, dude. LeBar, the fact that he's doing Sirius now, he's got his own day of Busted Open Radio. I think that's so awesome.
It's killing it, man. Killing it.
I mean, I always just wish we still had Chair Shot to do, because that was such a fun show to do with those guys. I know we did a pre-WrestleMania show a couple years ago, which was like a great reunion. We just Skyped a Skype session for like 2.5 hours just talking. But
that was another concept that was just completely light years ahead of everything else. Like I don't think people really grasped just like what that was ahead of what you see in here now. Like everybody's trying to do that now, but you guys were ahead of that a decade before, and it was
really were.
And it was a different kind of format. But the best part about it, and this is me kind of giving you guys your flowers right now, but the production value of it, I thought, was really something that was ahead of it, because you guys really put, not only was it just the content, it was the way it was presented. So it was presented in a way that had a different kind of feel to it, a different kind of look to it. So you could really watch that and like, wait a minute, there's nothing else like this? And there wasn't at the time. At least that wasn't, in-house within promotions or things like that. But there was nothing else that was independently done like that. So it was like Triple Live Radio, it was its own little organism that really had no ecosystem around it. It was just
Yeah.
it like kind of sat there on its own. And this is long before anybody knew who Britt Baker was.
Oh my
It's like,
God, I know
I
the
hear Britt
history.
Baker's name now. I'm like, dude, I knew who
Yeah.
Britt Baker was during the chair shot days. And they're like, which chair shot? I'm like, what? Like,
I know,
you're a
you had to
wrestling
be
fan?
there.
Seriously? Like, come on. And it's one of those things. Is like you had to be there, but if you know, you know. You know, if you're on the
That's
ground
right.
floor, you definitely understand
right.
it. So it was.
Yeah,
It's an awesome little slice of history.
absolutely. And yeah, sure, you gave us our flowers, and I could not be more appreciative of that. But Britt has done a little bit more than we all have.
Fair enough. That's fair.
Just a
That's
little
fair.
bit. But
It is kind of cool, and it kind of
Yeah.
does come full circle because a couple of my colleagues on the TV side have done interviews with Britt when AEW comes to town, and
Yeah.
she's done interviews with like KDKA and well, back then it was CW, but now it's KDKA Plus, and it's like, how does this keep coming full circle like this? Like it just comes back around. It's really weird, but it's a cool little. It's a cool little nod to times past where you're like, man, I remember when this was, an entirely different world, but you kind of see everything progress, and it really just ties off a really cool story. So I love it, man. I love watching it. I love seeing everybody branch out and doing what they're doing. So it's kind of confirmation to me. For me, it's like, all right, we knew what we were doing. We were kind of on the right path.
Yeah, you're a part of something, and you too, man. We talked about this before. We really got into the talk. You're all over the place. KDKA, you're on TV, you're on the radio, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're writing. You're a new father now, or another new father. You've had your second child. I feel like you're just living life, man. You're going all over the place. You got 30 different hats.
It's insane, man. Because when I was in college, I was at Duquesne, and people were asking me like, well, what do you want to do like when you get into it? I'm like, honestly, I was like, I want to do everything. I want to do TV. I want to do radio. I want to write. I want to, I want to do play-by-play. Like I wanted to do all these different things because I would see all these different elements. And like growing up, if you grew up in Pittsburgh and you grew up when I did, and you saw the John Fedcos and the John Steigerwalds and the Bob Pompianis and the Guy Junkers of the world, you're looking at them going like, those guys have the coolest job in the world. But it also coincided with the age of, Sports Center rising in popularity. You had the Big Show with Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann, and then you see Craig Kilborn and like these guys, and you're like, those dudes have the coolest job ever. And it was like I wanted to kind of follow that, but I also wanted the same kind of career path as like a Mike Greenberg or even a Guy Junker on the local aspect where they were doing TV, they were doing radio, they were writing, they were doing play-by-play occasionally. It's like, I kind of like that path. I kind of want to do it because I didn't want to be married to one thing. And you kind of turn around now, you're like, wait a minute, I'm doing TV, I'm doing radio, I'm doing play-by-play, and I'm writing. This is nuts. And you kind of stop and look at it. And I had someone, a guy I grew up with, like ran into him not too long ago. He's like, man, I got to tell you. He's like, dude, I'm really happy for you. He's like, you said you wanted to do all these things and you're doing them. And it took me a minute. Like,
that's so great.
Because you get caught up in, because you have goals and things you want to do and things that you're interested in, and you look at the things that didn't happen, like the job you wanted that you didn't get, or how you didn't get to do it in this market, or you didn't get to do it at this place. But then you realize, like, wait a minute, all the stuff I said I wanted to do or I said I was going to do, I'm doing. And it kind of makes you step back and say, okay, you kind of have to remind yourself that, sometimes you get caught up in some of the other stuff and you forget that you got to enjoy the ride. So
that's right. You're living it. You're living the dream. Like you're living what you wanted to do. You said full circle earlier. You're doing what you wanted to do. And
I tell people all the time, man, I'm the luckiest man in the world. And I don't say that for like ironic purposes. And I don't just say that because it's a fun quote. I say it because I actually believe it, man. It's
absolutely,
when you get to actually say like, this is what I want to do and you're doing it. And you have to be able to appreciate it and not get too caught up in some of the other stuff, because when you lose sight of it, that's when it all starts to like splinter, and that's when you lose it. And when you lose it and you stop appreciating it, that's when it all slips away and you wonder where it happened and where it all went. So I'm trying to keep a good clutch on it, and as long as I'm physically able, as long as I have the energy to do it, as long as I'm having fun, I'm gonna ride it out as long as I can.
Absolutely, man. So yeah, it's the world's just going. It's flying. Life is flying by. The world's flying by. 2015 is almost 9 years ago. So
if you would have told me, back when we were doing wrestling reality, like, hey, not only are you going to end up getting a job on a local terrestrial radio station here, but you're going to interview wrestlers on your radio show.
Right.
I'd be like, man, get out of here. Like, you're crazy. Like, whatever.
Right.
And to your point, like I've had segments with Eisenberg. I've had segments with LeBar on my Sunday morning show when I was still doing a Sunday morning show on The Fan. Corey Graves was gracious enough to do a segment with me. And shout out to Monroeville. And this was before there was the joint promotion with IWC and NEW a couple years back, and they were doing it for the Bruno Sammartino Foundation. And he was promoting that. And it just so happened a good friend of mine was working at NEW. He's like, hey, I can get you this interview. So shout out to Dave Giacello, who like helped make that happen. So we get this interview with Corey Graves. And then we find out, hey, we know a lot of the same people. He went to high school with people I went to college with. He worked with John Burton, who was my first sports director in TV. I'm like, this is crazy. So there's like all these different parallels. And now we follow each other on Twitter and kind of go back and forth every once in a while. We both just had kids. And it's just like, wait, what? How is this a thing? It's just really strange.
Dude, everything with you seems full circle in the wrestling. That's incredible.
It's so nuts. And I'll add this too, because this is one of those, like, I think the most surreal moment I ever had was there was an IWC show. Well, no, I'm wrong. It was an IWC show where Arn Anderson was like there for like a meet and greet and doing autographs and stuff. And they set up an interview with Arn Anderson. And like I am standing, I couldn't even sit in the chair in the studio. I had to stand up. I'm standing up in front of the mic because like I'm shaking, like hand shaking. I'm looking at my producer behind the glass. He's freaking out. He's looking at me. I'm freaking out. I'm sitting there going, I'm interviewing Arn Anderson right now, and I felt like Ricky Bobby. I didn't know what to do with my hands.
Time stands still, man.
It was absolutely surreal, and I'm like, this is like one of the crowning moments. And I have friends of mine that are wrestling fans, like, and I kept it really quiet because we didn't know until like the night before if we were going to get Arn Anderson on the show. Right. So the night before when I found out, I've texted all my friends. I'm like, you need to listen to my show at 9:00 tomorrow morning. You're later. And like, I think I tweeted it out like maybe an hour before it happened. And almost everybody I knew that was a wrestling fan was either texting me or tweeting me like, this is awesome. And it was one of those surreal moments. Like, dude, you as a wrestling fan working in media, this is it. This is as good as it gets. And it was a really, really awesome moment. And one of those things that like you never forget it. And you're like, you know what? I'd kill to be able to do that again. I'd be killed to have that opportunity. And I've had it a couple times. And I'm like, all right, let's ride this out and see where it goes.
Absolutely, man. I'm gonna go to a few more quick little nuggets, and then we'll close out with the rapid fire. Yep. Just kind of give me your first inkling of a response for the next 3 or 4 questions here. Gotcha. We're gonna transition into current stuff. So assuming you watch both products, well, you can watch any product really. Do you have a current favorite AEW wrestler?
Ooh, this is easy.
Okay.
And I'm so glad that the timing is lined up because it looks like she's back now. She just jumped in to help out Abaddon. So Thunder Rosa.
Hey, working with LeBar. How about that?
Working with LeBar. Want to talk about full circle? She came to Pittsburgh for an IWC show a couple years back. Yeah. I went out and LeBar got mad at me afterwards because I didn't know I was going until the day of. And shout out to Justin with IWC who got me the tickets because I went with my buddy Zach Weiss, who is a way bigger wrestling fan than I've ever been. Like he's just on an entirely different level. But we went out there, my buddy Dave Giacello, we all went and we went to the show. And of course, LeBar's there with Spencer Slade and he sees me like in the crowd or whatever. And later on he texts me and goes, dude, why didn't you tell me you were coming? I was like, it was last minute. I didn't know. And he's like, next time, let me know. I'm like, okay, I'll let you know. So he was kind of mad at me for not telling him. But it was an awesome show. Like the Hardys were there. Thunder Rosa was there. Eric Redbeard was there. Like this was a loaded card. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And we did the meet and greet afterwards. So I got to meet Thunder Rosa and talk to her. And there was only one thing I wanted to tell her. I'm like, look, I was like, I have to tell you this because my brother has his MSW, and he was in social work for years. I love what you do, like outside of the ring, like in the community and different stuff that you did. And like her eyes lit up. She goes, I'm really passionate about stuff like that, like being involved with community work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think it's awesome because my brother is one of those people who works in that realm, and like it drives a lot of what he does. And you can see that with her and what she does. So like one of the reasons why she's one of my favorites, like doesn't even have a lot to do with wrestling. It just so happens I think she's a great wrestler. But her outside the ring is what made me a fan. Like the way she interacts, like the general personality that she has, and like her commitment to really helping people. I was like, I can root for you. If you never wrestle another match again, I'm going to root for you forever. Just because this is the person she is.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool connection to have. And I mean, I know a lot of people that really gravitate towards people that they can relate to. I mean, I'm sure that's just, how it's supposed to be, but outside of the ring and gravitating towards that is like another level of fandom. So it's pretty cool that you have that little connection there. And that, it's nice that you can have that as your favorite in and out of the ring. How about current favorite wrestler in WWE?
Ooh, I'm going to go with the favorite I've had for years. And if it looks like there's a theme to this, there probably is. Because I've become a big proponent of women's wrestling. Okay. I am a ridiculously huge Asuka fan.
Oh, wow. Nobody's ready for Josh Taylor.
Huge Asuka fan. Like it's insane. And people are like, seriously? I'm like, yes, seriously. And anytime something happens with Asuka, I have like a lineup of friends. They're all texting me like, are you watching? Yes, I'm watching. I know. Yeah. So it's a big deal for me. But I mentioned an interview with Corey Graves, and I know Corey Graves was a big Asuka fan. So I'm like, dude, I got to ask you about this. I was like, because I know you love talking about her, and I know I love watching, but you got to tell me about when you first found out that Asuka was going to be in NXT. And he told me the whole story. He was like, dude, that's Kana. Like, Kana's coming to NXT. And he was like telling about how he freaked out about it. And I got to go to one Raw taping where I was with my buddy Zach. We got seats along the ramp. And I had my phone out taking like 8,000 pictures of Asuka and Kairi Sane. And they lost. I think it was a 4-way for the women's tag team titles, and they didn't win that night. And I think Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross won, and I was very angry. So like, this is not fair. But yeah, man, definitely a huge Asuka fan for sure.
Okay, I got a couple of friends that are into Asuka as well. I mean, I couldn't have picked any better women's wrestlers. I mean, the women's wrestling is really, really on fire in the last couple of years. There's so much depth on both rosters. All three. I mean, I count TNA as well. Their roster's stacked as well. So.
Yes, TNA women's wrestling definitely does not get the credit it deserves, and seeing Trinity make that leap there, I thought was awesome. It's just I like the whole depth aspect of it.
And if my guesses are any inclination, although I've been known to be wrong because I tell people that I refer to gambling as losing, so I wouldn't gamble on this, but I would wager potentially that Mercedes Moné might end up in TNA. So because of that Trinity connection. So we'll see what happens with that. Currently, just in general with storylines, is there any particular storyline that catches your eye? And you can say the Bloodline. That's okay. You can say the Bloodline. There's only so many storylines that have lasted 3 years in the last 35, so I get it. But what do you got? Up
until 2 or 3 months ago, I would have said the Bloodline. You know what? I'm having a lot of fun watching right now. I'm having fun watching LA Knight, man. It's okay. Yeah. I've had a couple friends.
You were at Payback. He was huge there.
I've had a couple friends who were lapsed fans.
Yeah.
And they're like, dude, he's making me watch. They're like, he's reeling me back in, and he's making me watch. Really good friend of mine at KDKA, and my buddy Pat, he's like, I don't think I've really been into wrestling probably since the Attitude Era. He goes, but LA Knight makes me watch. And to see how quickly he went from being Max Dupree to going back to LA Knight, and then just completely going like he went from the on-ramp straight into the left lane on a 4-lane highway. Yeah. And just was going like 90 miles an hour. And he's just taken off with it. And the way he comes in and has a crowd going, that crowd at Payback. And the thing is, we knew he was coming because John Cena set it up. I mean, he put it on a tee. So everyone there knew LA Knight was coming. So when the music dropped, like the pop in the building was insane. It's one of the loudest crowds I've ever heard. And I've covered some serious sporting events in my time. When I say it was wrestling show, sporting event, anything I've ever been at, one of the loudest responses I've ever heard, I'm not exaggerating.
Oh,
Watching
yeah.
this rise of LA Knight has been really, really fun. I'm just curious to see where it goes. But I'm enjoying each stop along the way, like people he's working with, matches he's in, storylines he's in. I'm like, all right, and they're just giving him tests here and there, and he's acing them, and it's fun, man.
Yeah.
I'm loving it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens as we get closer to the Royal Rumble and how far he'll take that match, assuming he's in it. I still think he's probably got a date with Logan Paul in the United States title, which would
I
be
would love to see that.
a great move.
Let
if
him get a
Logan's still
mid-card
champion by then.
title. Let him
Yeah.
get a mid-card title and let him work his way up. So that way, if he's even in, like, if he's really getting shot at a major title, I knew he was going to get served up to Roman to lose. Like, I knew that was coming.
Oh, of course, but he's still got
Right.
rubbed from being in the match.
True, and he put a good match on. So it's like, okay,
Of
now
course.
you know he can do it. He had a really great feud with The Miz. Give him
Yeah,
the
oh, yeah.
mid-card title and kind of let him work his way up. So that way, when you put him back into that main event category, into that title picture, there's no question that he belongs there. And when that time comes, he will belong, and everybody will be ready for it.
All right, we have reached my personal favorite portion of any time I've gotten to talk to someone for the first time on the show. Eisenberg and Labarre did it. Josh Cross and Donnie did it. And now you are going to go through what I like to call rapid fire. I'm going to run through just a bunch of random, no real order of questions that I've come up with. I always add a few or take some away as I think about this and ask different people these to get a different gauge. But I just want your quick, 5 to 10 second answer. Doesn't have to be a sentence. It doesn't have to be one word. It can just be short in stature. But I just want to rattle off these as quick as possible and get your input. So are you ready for rapid fire here in the juice box?
Yes, let's go. Let's go.
All right. First, and might be my most interesting question that I'm just specifically with you. Who in Pittsburgh media, and I would say maybe 93.7 The Fan specifically, is a closeted wrestling fan? Now, I know that you've mentioned before, Chris Muller. I know Donnie Football is a wrestling guy. There are a lot of wrestling guys over there. Is there anybody that doesn't want to admit that they're a wrestling fan that
absolutely.
is?
Absolutely. Bob Pompier is a closeted wrestling fan.
Really?
Without question. Oh, yeah, he knows what's going on. He knows. He'll talk to you about some old school wrestling. He'll talk to you about Attitude Era. He may not know exactly like all the details right now,
Right.
but he knows the game. Like he knows how it goes.
That's
Bob
incredible.
Pompiani, the man that I esteem in this market to be the GOAT closeted wrestling.
Yeah. He
Totally.
he is the GOAT for Pittsburgh wrestling media, Pittsburgh sports media. And
Oh yeah.
I mean, as time goes on, and unfortunately we lost Dan Savern recently,
Yes.
and
Rest in peace,
these
Dan.
guys, and these guys just don't last forever. And Bob Pompiani is one of the most genuine, nice guys,
What a
just
human.
in the media realm, let alone Pittsburgh, but just in the in the nation.
Yes.
So that's hilarious to know that, and I'd love to pick his brain on that. So that's
He's gonna
that's
kill me
hilarious.
when he hears that I said that, but it's true. I believe it.
Oh man! All right, let's get into the other ones. That was so kind of purposefully for you. So I'm glad you got that. I honestly, if I would have picked one person that you could have said, even though I wouldn't have bought it, I would have said Bob Pompiani. Like that was a
Yeah.
perfect answer. All right, rapid fire. Let's go. Hogan or Flair?
Ooh. Flair.
Favorite era of The Undertaker?
I'll go with like the Gothic Ministry. Was it the not the
Ministry-
Ministry? Yeah,
Ministry of Darkness.
Ministry of Darkness. Thank you. I'll go with that one.
Okay. Would you want to see Rock versus Cena 3?
Yes.
Smart man. Saturday or Sunday night for pay-per-view?
Oh God, Saturday night.
Absolutely.
Oh, so much better.
You're
So
telling me.
much
Favorite WrestleMania?
better. Oh, that's a tough one.
There's only 39 of them.
I know. Was it 2013? Was that New Orleans? No, it was in Florida.
Well, do you have the main event or anything specifics?
Oh God,
Can help you out.
It's gonna bother me now.
If you said New Orleans, is the one where Daniel Bryan won the title?
Yes, thank you. That was New Orleans.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, WrestleMania 30.
Yes, and I will say as another one to that one because it might be a tie. The WrestleMania at MetLife with Kofi Mania and Becky in the same show.
That was the last Mania I was at, 35. The main event didn't start until after midnight.
Yes, it was good though. It was worth staying.
Oh yeah, it was great. All right. HBK versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania. The first match or the second match? Which is your favorite?
The first match was better from the technical standpoint, but the second one, the storyline was better, and I love a good story, so I'll say the second one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Favorite face of Foley?
Mankind.
Okay.
You can't see Mick Foley and not think of Undertaker throwing him off the cage at Civic Arena. You can't.
I was gonna say in Pittsburgh. Love that.
Yes.
Your favorite match of the first 9 WrestleManias, but not a Hulk Hogan match. I think you kind of already mentioned it earlier.
Oh yeah, Savage and Steamboat. Definitely.
Okay. Is there any other one that you can recall, or is that one just gonna stick with you?
Top of my head, I have to go back and think about it.
It's no big deal.
Yeah, I'll stick with Savage and Steamboat. That'll be my final answer.
It's a hell of a match, so you're good there.
Absolutely.
All right. A couple more. Favorite tag team of all time?
Ooh, not fair. You're gonna think I'm crazy, but Kai and Tai.
Yeah, indeed.
Kai and Tai made me laugh.
Yeah.
To measures I can't describe. Just from the pure entertainment standpoint, Kai and Tai from a wrestling standpoint.
Hey, Taka Michinoku is a hell of a in-ring performer.
Oh my God!
And I like
driver, dude.
Yes, and I think Funaki was underrated.
Of course, I totally agree. Entertainment standpoint, Kai and Tai. Wrestling standpoint, Dudley Boys, man. They did everything. Yeah. They were incredible.
Absolutely. This is a big one. Brett or Shawn?
Oh. Shawn was such an entertainer, dude.
Yeah.
Brett was technically excellent. Brett
was the excellence of execution.
If you could create a wrestler, it was going to be Bret Hart. But Shawn could put on a show and tell a story, dude. Oh my God.
He was a showstopper. Yeah. I mean, these are all the. Who you got? You can only pick one.
Oh, Shawn, definitely Shawn.
Shawn Michaels. All right.
I love Brett, but Shawn was a storyteller, dude. He was so great at it.
All right, now this is what I like to call the softball of the show. Favorite wrestling podcast?
Can I say Wrestling Reality?
I don't know. It might be a defunct podcast.
I guess I gotta go with the Jukes Box. I'll be honest with you. I'm not listening to any other ones.
Hey, I'll take that.
You're the only one I'm listening to. So,
I'll take that. I appreciate that.
I mean, I'm not trying to, dog anybody else, but
yeah,
gotta dance with the date that brought you,
Appreciate it, brother. All right, man. That's all I got for rapid fire. I thought you killed that. The answers you had, I agree with almost every single one. I don't do the rapid fire to see if I agree, but your takes were pretty close to mine, I would say. Like the Taker HBK one, Rock Cena 3, I feel like should definitely would be very interesting to see. I don't think it's gonna happen, but I think it would be like now I'd want to see it because it's 10 years later, And
I want to see a 3 just to get the taste from 2 out of my mouth.
Yes. Oh my God. The first one was so good and the second one was not unnecessary. So let's get a third one.
And it felt like you didn't need to do it that soon. They could have let that breathe a bit and brought it back around. And the thing is, they could have done it 5 years down the road and people would have still been all in. Like people would have lost their minds and still been in on it. So I think you do a third and people would still go crazy.
Oh,
for
well,
sure.
absolutely. But I think they should have that 29 should have just been Rock, Cena, and Punk in a triple threat. I
Oh
think
my
that
God.
would have been
Oh
gold.
man. Oh, and I don't think people really appreciate just how good Punk Cena at Money in the Bank in was it 2013 in Chicago?
No, that was in 2011.
2011? Like I don't
Yeah.
think people really realize how good of a match that was. That match was
Yeah.
incredible.
It's one of the most important matches in probably the last 25 years. And it's just
One of my
crazy now.
favorites of all time for sure.
Absolutely, man. It's just crazy now that we are here talking wrestling and CM Punk is somehow back in WWE.
It's like it doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. And
It doesn't.
I
I can't believe that I can't believe that he left wrestling, never wanted to come back, came back, but it was another company, and already has left that company on bad terms and is now back making amends with WWE. Like things that never should have happened are happening.
I remember where I was when he showed up on Rampage. And I
Yeah.
remember
Oh
where I
yeah.
was when I was watching him when he showed up on Survivor Series. And I remember having the crazy part was I was literally in the same room for both situations. But
Wow.
both times I'm just like, how is this possible? Like, how is this happening?
That's right.
And it was really cool to watch. As a wrestling fan, you hate to say it's just like it's one of those textbook moments, but
Yeah.
it is, man. It's one of those moments that you cannot. You don't want to be one of those people that says I missed out on it. Like I know
Oh,
FOMO
I
was a
know.
thing, but as a
Oh
wrestling
yeah.
fan, you can't miss out on that. You can't.
And especially live. Like I know you can. Of
Oh
course,
God,
it was the biggest social media moment in the history of WWE. They put that out there every week.
absolutely
But
nuts.
I
So
mean,
crazy.
with outside of that, wrestling is such a unique thing because it's live. Like next week, something different's gonna happen that's gonna maybe negate everything you just saw tonight. Like
Right.
you want to catch up. Like there is no off season. WrestleMania hits, and then the next night you got to get ready to go again. Like
It's
it's
like
a
a
great.
season of Lost. You missed 2 episodes. You're like,
Yeah,
where the hell are we?
you're lost, right? It's unbelievable. So, man, this has been a great time talking with you, Josh. I can't believe that. Like we were talking about earlier. It's been almost 9 years since 2015 hit, and we were doing Trip Live Radio, and the fact that you were teaching me how to do, phone boards and talking to people and hanging up on people and making sure that no one said anything crazy, and
Yes, because
now
that's
I'm on
important.
here guiding you along so we can get this bucket of bolts going. And
Uh,
man, we were chatting it up for over an hour. So this has been wonderful, man.
I could have done another couple if you asked me to. I don't care. I probably would have woke one of my
Absolutely.
kids up and I'd get yelled at it, but it'd been worth it. I don't care. It's worth it for
Oh,
sure.
absolutely. And yeah, so this has been the SIP series. I'm going to do a few, not this is not a finite thing. I'm going to continue to interview people, different fans of wrestling. People could be involved in wrestling, could just be on the outskirts or maybe former fans of wrestling. This is going to be for anybody that has any sort of inkling of wrestling. So it's going to continue, but this is the first episode of the SIP series in the Juice Box, outside of a normal regular episode. But I mean, not too much is happening right now. Next week we'll get the World's End AEW predictions, which will be fun. But this is a nice little deviation, man, and I really appreciate you being on here with me. Any last words before we part at 12:30 now, as we are recording this in the morning?
I'm honored, man. This is cool. It's I don't get to do this a lot. I don't get to
Yeah,
talk about wrestling as much as I want to, especially with the different outlets I work in. So to do something like this and to do this with you on this
yeah.
platform with all the history involved and everything that's going on, it's cool, man. This is a fun little trip down memory lane, and of course, any chance I get to talk about wrestling, I'm going to jump on it. So yeah, I'm honored, man. I'm honored to be the first in the SIP series, and I'm looking forward to the rest of it and see how this goes. And everybody else you have on, I think this is going to be a lot of fun for you definitely, and probably for everybody else coming along. So it's cool to be the first man through.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, I honestly, I told people when I first was going to start a podcast. So I've done YouTube, I've done Blog Talk Radio, I did Chair Shot, I've done video, audio, I've done it all. I've written articles about it, but just strictly audio podcast, I never did. And I was like, you know what, I can probably do it, but if I want to do it, I want to do it kind of on my own, and because I never want to just hook on with one or two or three people every week, because if it's not as successful as they want it to be, they might leave. I want to just do it for me and bring people in, and then that way everybody can still get involved. And if it's to my liking, I'm just going to still put out episodes regardless of how successful. So I think it opens up more doors and avenues to anybody can come in and have a good time, and that's it. Like, they can go away and then they can come back and do it again. Like, there is
That's the best part about it, man. Like,
yeah, there's no finite about it.
I love when you're able to just, I mean, granted, yes, you're doing work, but at the same time, if it is something that you're passionate about, it's something that you enjoy, something that you love, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like you're just hanging out with your friends. It feels like you're just, you could be anywhere. You could be sitting in a back room somewhere, or you could be in front of your computer in your office with a headset on in front of a microphone. It doesn't matter. Like, it's almost like the lines are blurred. And those are the best times. And we've had that. We've already had that foundation already set with Trib Live Radio almost a decade ago. And I think that's really kind of carried itself on. I think that's kind of what drives both of us at this point.
Absolutely, man. I could not have said it any better myself. But of course, you're the radio and TV guy. I have the face for podcasts, so that's why we are here in the Juice Box. So appreciate it. I'm gonna have you let's see, tagged in this. So what, Josh Taylor HD at Josh Taylor HD on Twitter,
yes,
or X as the kids call it. I, of course, at Juicy Steen on Twitter. As always, you can follow this show, juicysteen.podbean.com, Apple Podcast, rate this 5 stars, drop a review if you'd like. Google Podcasts as well, Instagram, Juicy Wrestling Closet. I think I've done all those. Next week, we got World's End prediction show. Maybe we'll have Eisenberg in here. Maybe it'll just be me. Maybe it'll be somebody else. Who knows? But, man, this has been great. Appreciate you, Josh. And you're welcome back at any time. I don't know when we can reconnect, but, I mean, our lines are always open. So,
appreciate you, brother.
Anytime.
Give me a shout. Give me a shout. Let me know when you want to do it. I'm in for sure.
Absolutely, man. Anytime, you'd be welcome right back here in the Juice Box. So for Josh Taylor, I'm Juice Springsteen. Hope you guys enjoyed the SIP series, this first little episode of it. And appreciate you guys listening, as always. Next week, World's End prediction show. But I'm Juice Springsteen. He's Josh Taylor. And this has been the Juice Box. That was the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to the Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.